What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Scott here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. This week we have an extra special Skyrim Remastered build to share with you. This build pushes the limits of roleplaying to create a truly unique experience unlike any other playthrough, and with this remaster comes a fleshed out backstory, fully realized roleplaying, and a bunch of new skills and perks. So without further ado, this is the Dremora Warlord. The Dremora Warlord is no mere mortal of Tamriel. He is a Daedra of Mehrunes Dagon's realm of the Deadlands. Forged in fire and destruction, there are few better warriors in the Elder Scrolls universe. He has spent lifetimes mastering the sword and shield and can cast the fiery devastation of oblivion from his hands thanks to the power of his destruction spells. The Dremora Warlord is a fugitive of Mehrunes Dagon, disguising himself as a Dunmer on Tamriel, but despite his lack of horns, he is still a mighty warlord, proven from eras of warfare. Not even the Daedric Prince of Destruction can keep him tied down. Before we get into it, don't forget that you can move around each section of the video at your own leisure by checking out the timestamps in the description. But with that said, here's the Dremora Warlord's race, standing stone, and stats. The Dremora Warlord is a Dremora, a humanoid Daedra, but due to the circumstances explained in the backstory, he is on the run under the guise of a slightly odd-looking dark elf. So for the sake of role-playing, the race you'll want to pick is Dunmer. But don't worry, all of this will make sense very soon. With this disguise, and thanks to an eternity spent in the lava-ridden Deadlands, he'll be able to deal 8 points of fire damage to opponents who get too close for 60 seconds per day. He'll also have a 50% resistance to fire, which is fitting, and another benefit will be the plus 10 boost to destruction. Early in the game, the Lava Stone will be useful for leveling all of your skills, but once that's said and done, the Atronach Stone is by far the best choice. I know you guys love it when we pick the Atronach Stone. It gives 50 points of extra magicka and 50% spell absorption in exchange for minus 50% magicka regeneration. As for stats, the Dremora Warlord will have 50% health, 30% magicka, and 20% stamina. 50% health is all you'll need, as your superior armor and shield will do enough to keep you safe. 30% magicka will ensure you're never short of fire spells to use. Casting these will get infinitely easier once you start your enchanting. And lastly, 20% stamina will keep you shield charging, shield bashing, sprinting, and power attacking until your heart's content. The Dremora Warlord was not born in Tamriel, and in fact he is no mortal. He is a Dremora residing in the harsh realms of the Deadlands, Mehrunes Dagon's realm of oblivion. This immortal was driven by power and sought to be the greatest warrior in Dagon's legions. Existing in such a desolate land hardened him, and he fought with the ferocity and strength you'd expect from one of Dagon's most capable leaders. Towards the climax of the Oblivion Crisis, Mehrunes Dagon entrusted the Dremora Warlord to lead his army through the Great Gate at Bruma. The Warlord had been training for an eternity for an opportunity like this. It would have the chance to take out Martin Septim, the heir to the Imperial Empire. When the fateful day came and the Warlord marched his Dremora army through the gate, he let out a blood-curdling battle cry. And then, just like that, they were on the mortal plane. Beneath a blood-red sky, masses of men and Daedra clashed. Each individual impact amalgamated in one enormous thump that could be heard for leagues. All the while, soldiers screamed and shouted, steel rang and horses whinnied. As he surveyed the battlegrounds searching for the Septim heir, the Dremora Warlord felt the power of the giant gaping Oblivion Gate behind him. Tongues of red and orange energy lashed out. A deep hum and a vibrant glow was emanating from it, which turned the world around him the color of the Deadlands. His legions had brought hellfire to the mortal plane, and the mortals would suffer their wrath. After dispatching of some foolish mortals with delusions of grandeur, the Dremora Warlord noticed Martin Septim behind a line of soldiers. He weaved his way across the battlefield, closing the distance on the air while killing any men who came too close. And then Martin's eyes locked with him and their swords met. The rigid, opaque black of the Warlord's Daedric sword was a stark contrast to Septim's shining blade. Good had collided with evil, and the Warlord had no intention of letting good prevail. Martin Septim fought defensively, parrying the Warlord's mighty blows, and this frustrated the Warlord. How dare a mortal resist him? He began to swing wildly, but Septim caught him off guard in a reckless sweep. Septim parried the blow, opening the Warlord's guard before thrusting the shining sword deep into his chest. The red sky darkened in the Warlord's vision, and his life force leaked from the wound rapidly, causing his consciousness to fade. The next thing he knew, he was back in the Deadlands, chained in place and awaiting punishment from his prince. For his failure, Mehrunes Dagon condemned him to an eternity of suffering. He was kept at the top of a tower to be subjected to routine torture. The worst thing about his fate for the warlord was the smug, slimy little scamp who was in charge of the punishment. The filthy gremlin clearly took pleasure from the job, and it cackled maniacally whenever the warlord was lashed or dipped in lava. The Dremora Warlord endured this for some time, spending his respites from torture staring over the edge of the tower. He began to notice serious preparations taking place. It seemed as though Dagon himself was going to enter the mortal plane to finish the war himself. The Dremora Warlord saw this as his time to take action. When the smirking scamp emerged to escort him to torture, he would have a small window of time to resist. They were going to lock him in place vertically before carving symbols into his flesh with heated blades. As the scamp removed his shackles to fasten him to the straps, the warlord jerked his elbow backwards, catching the vile creature in the face. Its squeal of pain was remarkably similar to its joyful cackle. He stood over the scamp, which was writhing on the floor. He raised his bare foot and he slammed it down on the scamp's head, crushing it into a puree of brains. Dagon was otherwise occupied and the Oblivion gates were open. Now would be his only chance to escape. With nothing but the tattered shift he wore, the warlord ran through the first gate he saw. He was suddenly somewhere in Cyrodiil's wilderness, and thankfully nobody else was around. At first, he didn't stray too far from the gates. He had held the vain hope that a victory might encourage Dagon to be merciful towards him, but that hope was crushed the day the gates closed. Mehrunes Dagon would be bitterly vitriolic to all his servants for however long it would take him to recover his pride. There was no chance for an escaped warlord to avoid his ire. That much was clear to him. There was only one course of action left for the Dremora Warlord. He would need to blend in amongst the mortals. He cut off his horns that night and left them in the forest. Without his horns, he could at least hope to pass as a malformed dark elf. He spent many centuries hiding out in the forests near Cheydinhal, but come the 200th year of the Fourth Era, he decides to head north. In Skyrim, they were too preoccupied fighting petty civil disputes between Nords and Imperials. Nobody would bat an eye at a Dunmer refugee, and so he headed north in hopes of lying low and avoiding death, as that would force him to face Dagon once again. His attempts to stay alive were dashed quite quickly, however, and he was caught on the border and taken to Helgen. After he escapes an early return to the Deadlands thanks to Alduin's intervention, the Dremora Warlord will work on forging a new path on the mortal plane. Fortunately, with the turmoil that Skyrim is currently caught up in, he'll have no trouble finding evil deeds to get involved with. He will be on the lookout for the most evil people in the province to work alongside, and that will eventually lead him to the Dark Brotherhood. Despite fearing death, or more accurately, an unpleasant reunification with the Daedric Prince, the Dremora Warlord will still spend a lot of time fighting. He never doubts his power and combat prowess and will take down mere mortals without concern. As mentioned earlier, he will be self-conscious about his appearance, avoiding showing too much of his face to the people of Skyrim. As a result, he will wear helmets in many circumstances, especially when on Dark Brotherhood quests, which take him into major cities. The main piece of role-playing here is to remember that you aren't a Dunmer, but a Dremora, and we'll have to approach situations with that in mind. Your kind isn't welcome in Skyrim. As for factions, more serious role-playing is required. The build is very unique in that we aren't playing a Tamrielic race, so lore associated with that prerequisite kinda goes out the window. As an immortal Dremora, it's not really plausible or lore-friendly for you to become the Dragonborn in the main quest, or play through the Dragonborn DLC questline by extension. We know that sucks, but in order to rationalize the character, you can't really be the Chosen One. You could actually do the Dawnguard DLC, however, as there's nothing stopping you from joining the Dawnguard, and you could even join the Volkihar clan too. Daedra have been known to be susceptible to curses. Just look at the Daedaroth turning into a were-Daedaroth at the hands of Hircine. The Dark Brotherhood is a must for this cold-hearted killer, and the College of Winterhold works well for the role-playing, and not only can the Dremora Warlord enhance his skills, but he can also learn more about how mortals use magicka. Now that we have the Warlord's backstory, role-playing, and faction sorted, let's look at this stage's skills, spells, perks, and overall playstyle. The main skills for this build will be one-handed heavy armor, block destruction, enchanting, and smithing. Block is a brand new addition to the build and will totally change up the playstyle. Before we look into the specific perks for each skill, these are the spells you'll want to acquire. All of your spells will obviously be destruction, and as a Dremora of the Deadlands, what other type of destruction spell could you possibly use other than fire? Grab the Wall of Flame spell, as this will be his primary choice, and then feel free to take any one-handed fire spells you'd like to use. But with that said, here are the Dremora Warlord's essential perks. You don't exist in a hellish realm riddled with hideously deadly creatures and seas of lava without the ability to protect yourself. The Dremora Warlord was trained to be the best. He was trained to demonstrate the killing power of a prince who represents destruction and ambition. As a result, it's not a big stretch to say that this build is quite proficient with a sword in hand. From the one-handed skill tree, take the middle branch up to Savage Strike and Critical Charge. With Critical Charge, you can make an impact right out of the gates, slamming into the opposition with a sprinting power attack that does double critical damage. Savage Strike is also pretty handy. Nothing destroys the enemy's morale like seeing one of their ranks have their head forcefully removed from their shoulders, and with Savage Strike you'll have the chance to decapitate your opponents. Oh, and it also gives you a 25% bonus damage to standing power attacks. Why do Dremora look so badass and demonic? Could be the red eyes and horns, but a big factor is the heavy Daedric armor, with its nightmarish spikes streaked a bloody red. The Dremora Warlord keeps up appearances and has worn the suit since the day he joined Dagon's legions. He's no stranger to heavy armor. From this skill tree, we say take everything. With all of these perks, you'll be much better equipped to avoid death and the wrath of Mehrunes Dagon. Matching set is a great pick as the Dremora Warlord will only be wearing Daedric armor and won't be switching it out for anything else. When wearing a matching set of heavy armor, your armor rating will be 25% better. Next up, we have our brand new skill, and we're not just dabbling. On top of this Daedric armor and sword, he'll also be an expert of the Daedric shield. And from the block skill tree, you should once again take the lot. Block Runner and Shield Charge are two perks which will work well alongside the Critical Charge perk as they reward an aggressive entry onto the battlefield. Block Runner also increases your movement speed with a shield raised, and Shield Charge will knock down most targets you hit while your shield is up. Fire is a Daedra's best friend, especially if you hail from the Deadlands, and the Dremora Warlord is very well versed in fire-based destruction magic. From this skill tree, you'll want to take the left branch up to and including Intense Flames, and then the fourth branch up to Expert Destruction. As we said, the Warlord will only be using fire-based spells, so Augmented Flames and Intense Flames are great value. With Augmented Flames, fire spells will do 50% more damage, and with Intense Flames, fire spells will send enemies with low health fleeing. Up next, we have Smithing. You don't reach the rank of Warlord if you don't know how to take care of arms and armor, and since the Dremora Warlord has been left to fend for himself in an unfamiliar realm, these skills are even more handy to have. From the Smithing skill tree, we suggest taking Arcane Blacksmith and then right branch up to Daedric Smithing, all pretty straightforward from here. All of your equipment is Daedric, so the Daedric Smithing perk is all you need, and then Arcane Blacksmith will allow you to keep improving them after they've been enchanted. And with that said, enchanting is the final skill. From this tree, take Fire Enchanter from the first branch, and then the entire second branch up to extra effect. Fire Enchanter improves the fire enchantment on weapons and armor by 25%, and extra effect will allow you to put 2 enchantments on each of your items. Once all of these skills are mastered and you've got your hands on the necessary spells and perks, this is what the Dremora Warlord's playstyle will look like. He'll enter the battle with his shield in his left hand and flames in the right. You'll use your shield to charge and bash your foes before raining hot fire on the knockdown enemies with Wall of Flames. This is when you switch out to your sword and finish them off. Another approach would be to use the Wall of Flames out of the gates and then charging through the fire to send your enemies flying before whipping out your sword and chopping them into bite-sized chunks. Keeping the shield out for shield bashes and defense is usually the best option, so your combos will almost always be sword and shield or magic and shield. If you're feeling ultra aggressive though, feel free to switch to magic and a sword like the original build. The gear for the Dremora Warlord is pretty straightforward. You'll need a full set of Daedric armor, including the shield and sword. Enchant all of the armor and the shield with enchantments like Reduction to Destruction magic cost and Fortify one-handed, and then chuck fire damage and absorb health on the sword. Until that point in the early game, you'll have to dress like one of them disgusting mortals with their inferior metals. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet if you're new to the channel, and give the video a like if you enjoyed the Dremora Warlord. This is definitely one of our more ambitious builds, and we love figuring out how to play these characters in the most lore-friendly way. So show us the support if you want to see more. Check out the description for our Twitter links and go follow us there. Also in the description are timestamps to help you find your way around the video. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'm Scott, and I look forward to nerding out with you again next time.